Hello there, fellow co-psychics and aspiring psychics. This is Spiritual Psychic Cynthia Killian, also known as Psychic Cynthia. And I'd like to welcome you to today's video, which is dealing with a most interesting topic, one of my favorite topics, and that is making predictions in readings. And this video is geared for those of you who are developing your own psychic abilities and possibly your own psychic practice. And, if you're even just working with tarot cards for yourselves or the runes or a divination tool, in other words, if you're learning to read for yourself and possibly for a few others, even if it's just a few friends or family, predictions. I mean, this is something I get asked about a lot. How do you do that? And, how can you take your readings to the next level with predictions? And I will start by saying that predictions aren't easy. Even if you're working with a divination tool, such as the tarot or the runes, predictions are a tricky aspect of psychic reading. And, it's good to develop before you even really get into attempting to make predictions. It's good to develop your psychic foundation, your primary intuitive and psychic sensing. You want to work on the basics first before you try to be an expert predictor or any kind of predictor. And in this video today, what I would like to do is just sort of introduce the topic of making psychic predictions and maybe talk about some of the factors that are involved and why it's hard. And listen, this might need to be a two-parter or even a three-parter. Heck, this might need to be its own series, making psychic predictions, how to do that accurately. But let me share some thoughts with you on that. First of all, what I would like to just start off by saying is that it seems to me, from my many years of practice as a psychic and knowing so many other psychics through my involvement in spiritualism and just being out on the scene, it seems to me that some psychics are much better at making predictions than others. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the person is a bad psychic, quote unquote, if they're not good at making predictions. Because really a great deal of a psychic reading has nothing to do with predictions, in my experience. Even though most people think that what psychics do is read the future primarily. But I think if you're doing some readings now, you've probably figured out that's not true really, or that's an oversimplification, let's say. As I like to tell my clients when they come for a first time reading, the readings contain all of it, past, present, and future, because really, there is no time. I mean, we experience time here, but really, truly, in the cosmic sense, there's just the now. But getting back to the earthly realm where we are currently experiencing past, present, and future, right? Most readings have some element, at least the readings I do, and I think many psychics, it will have some element of all three of those. And then the reading will tend to focus more on one or the other. But it's not always the future. I've done many readings for clients where we have to go back into the past, especially a first reading, because they're still processing the past. They still have questions about what happened and they don't understand. And that's one tip I would share with you here. Don't assume that if you're reading for another person, even yourself, don't assume that what you need to know the most about is the future. You may need to know more about the past because you haven't processed it or you don't understand it yet. And many clients that come to me just need to know about what's going on right now. I say right now, not like at the exact moment we're doing the reading, but pretty close. So the recent past, in other words, because they're dealing with, some sort of crisis. And I can't even really take them that far into the future yet until we deal with the present moment and the current events, as I like to call it, current events, right? I mean, it's all great if you see somebody, let's say in a relationship reading, somebody's in a relationship crisis with their current partner, And it's all great if you see that 6 years down the road, or even 2 years down the road, they're going to be with somebody else and they're going to be happy and it's going to be wonderful. That's all great. But if they are in the midst of a crisis with their current partner, you could tell them all day long about what you see in the bright future, and they're not going to hear you. Not really. They're not going to be able to receive it. So, maybe right off the top, one of the things I would share about predicting the future, this isn't how to predict it, but it is more about knowing when that is needed and sensing that and feeling that. And when you're doing a reading for someone else, especially, the purpose of doing that reading is not to show off. It's not to show what a great psychic you are and how wonderful you are at predicting the future. It's to serve your client, to help them. That's why you do the reading, to help them deal with their problems, and perhaps to help them spiritually awaken if they're open to that. But the first part is very important, to help them deal with their problems. Actually, most people don't go to a psychic consciously and say in their mind, I'm going to the psychic to spiritually awaken. Most people don't do that, okay? That doesn't mean that through your readings you can't help them to spiritually awaken. Because listen, if you're helping them deal with their current emotional and mental issues on some level, or even physical issues, just real world issues is what I'm saying. This world issues. If you're helping them to process that and deal with that, then you are helping them to spiritually awaken. I mean, even if you don't even get a chance to talk with them about their guides or their spiritual gifts, if you're helping them deal with some things, that will contribute to their future spiritual growth. So, I digress a little, but it's all relative here, or all relevant, I should say. So, know when predictions are needed and when they are not. And just because somebody asks for it in a reading doesn't mean it's needed either. Generally, I like to try to give my paying clients what they ask for. In terms of looking at it, if they ask me to look for something to see, the past, the present, or the future, I try to do that, if I can. But then there are times in certain situations where a client will ask me to predict the future, and I will not. I will refuse, okay? Now keep in mind, my clients are used to me as a reader, and I'm a very, in some ways I'm new wave, but in some ways I'm old school. And, if a client asks me to make predictions, say in a relationship about the future, but I really feel for them strongly that they need to deal with the past or what is going on right now, I will say that. I will say, look, I can't even begin to look at what's going to happen in the future because you have this situation right now and we really need to address this for you. Something like that. But okay, keeping all of that in mind, just know when predictions are needed. Because most of the time, if you understand the past and if you understand the current situation, you will know the future already. It's not that hard once you understand the past and the current situation. Those components of time or experience, those are much more difficult, in my experience, to predict the future. And I think bringing it back to what I opened with, talking about, it seems to me there are some psychics that are much better naturally at predicting the future, and some psychics that just don't seem to be so good at it, even though they might be good at some other aspects of reading. And there could be a lot of reasons for that, but one of the reasons I believe that is true is because the psychics who are really good that I have seen at predicting the future slow down and take the time in the reading to first get a firm grasp of the current situation and possibly part of the past as well. And when I say get a firm grasp, how do you do that? You might do that by asking some questions of your client. It's okay to ask some questions if you need to about the past if you don't understand. Now, those of you who have heard me talk about readings and all that in the past, or even watched me read, you know that my personal style, I don't ask a lot of questions of my clients, actually. I tend to just get in there, do the reading, open up, get the information, and relay it to them to make statements. But if there's something I don't understand, if I'm getting a piece of information and I don't understand how it applies, I might ask, well, like if I saw something that felt like a death energy, I would probably say I feel the death energy. And then it would be okay to ask, I think, has somebody recently died, or do you feel like you're going through a metaphorical death? Those kinds of questions, okay? Don't get too caught up in asking questions. The reason I don't do a lot of that is because I actually find when you ask a lot of questions of your sitter, in other words, the person you're reading for, that can confuse you as a psychic and sort of block your flow if you're asking them too much at the same time you're trying to receive. But if you have already received something and you have relayed it to your client, and you then need to ask questions, if there's anything important that you feel you need to know, ask the question about the past or the current situation. That's what I'm saying. That will help you to get into the future. It will also just help you to know this. Hey, how about this? Think about this. It will help you to sort out what you're getting, what you're feeling. Is it relating to the past or is it relating to the future? And that's not always easy to know, okay? So that's another reason why predicting the future can be very difficult, even for the best of psychics. And listen, some psychics are just good at it and some aren't. But these are some reasons why I think that the ones who are good at it might be good at it, because we know to make sure we have a little bit more of a grasp on the past and the current situation before trying to leap off into the future. Because here's the thing. The present moment creates both the past and the future. I want you to think about this for a second. And think about how this works. Right now, when I just said that word now, that was the present moment, but already it has gone into the past. I've just created the past with the speech that I have said here. And then as a result of the words that I say or the actions that I do, there will be consequences, right? That will put certain energies into motion, certain patterns, and then that will create the future. Think about that for a moment. If you need to, rewind the video and listen again. What you're doing right now will very shortly, instantaneously become the past, and the consequences of this action that you did now, which are now in the past, will lay down an energy pattern that will create the future. Got it? So this is why we need to understand, if you are a psychic or a tarot card reader or a rune reader or even an astrologer, reading for clients or for yourself, even your family, reading for people who want you to attempt to predict the future, you need to have a little bit of a grasp of their past, their patterns, okay? You need to have an understanding of that. And whether that understanding comes purely from you using your psychic ability to tune into their energy and see what you feel about their general overall pattern, or it might come because you already know the person, so you have some idea about their patterns. Although I would never rely on that only. I would never rely on my intellectual understanding only in a psychic or a divination reading for another. So just because you think you know their past, just because you think you know their story, it's fine to utilize that information if it enhances the reading, and especially if it enhances the way you interact with your client and helps you to treat them better, then that is wonderful. For example, I mean, if you were reading for somebody that you were aware had a history of abuse in relationships, I would think that that might slightly change how you deliver the reading. It wouldn't change what you see necessarily, but certainly I think you'd want to be more sensitive to them and be more gentle. I mean, if they had suffered abuse recently, for example. Okay, so that's how knowledge that you have about consciously through your intellect, that's how that might help, for example. But yes, tune into the energies of their current patterns. I mean, just think about any divination reading layout you ever see, like for the tarot or the runes or whatever. I mean, it almost always starts with the current issue or the person in the current moment, and then it goes to the past, and then it goes to the future, right? It's the same concept. It's the same concept, really. So it will actually help you to be able to predict the future if you can tune into those energy trends and patterns. Notice that I'm talking about energy trends and patterns because that's what shapes the future. Now, when you're dealing with predicting the future, you have to understand that this is not an exact science. It's really a lot like being a weather person, a meteorologist, right? You know, when you hear the predictions for the weather, I mean, they don't just say it's going to rain tomorrow. It's statistical in a lot of ways. So they say, 50% chance of rain. Occasionally they do say 100% chance of rain, but that's very rare. They're more likely to say 80 or 90% chance of rain. Because there's this idea with weather that we understand. So I want you to think about weather. Making predictions, psychic predictions, even astrological or divination predictions, it's very similar to the weather predictions, and that with weather we understand there are winds that can that do in fact bring these fronts in and move them around all the time. So think about those being the winds of change, right? And we understand there are other factors, solar factors. I mean, just the time of year, right? I'm filming right now in early spring, and there are certain tendencies to that cycle. So cycles, there are larger cycles, just times of year. If somebody is asking about a vacation, for example, and you want to predict the future, tune into the cycles for them, the time of year. There are karmic cycles. There are, you can feel if somebody is in a cycle of cleansing versus a cycle of building, for example. Are they in a cycle of energy that is focused on romance, or are they in a cycle of energy that is focused on finances? Or, how are their energies flowing? What is the current dominant theme of their current spiritual cycle, for example? But there are these factors that affect the energy trends, just like the weather is affected by all these factors. And basically, what I'm saying here is until something has actually happened, there is no way we can say with 100% certainty that that is what will happen. So just know that right off the top, there is no way to 100% know something is going to happen until it does. Now, that being said, you can develop your own awareness of making predictions, your own techniques, your own, really way of doing it, your own method. And you can start to figure out what works for you, and you can start to figure out when you are more certain something is going to happen and when you're less. And here's a tip for you. If you are not very certain, if you don't feel that very strongly, as in this is going to happen in the future, it's better to not mention it. Or at least to let the client know that you're just feeling it as a possibility. You're not sure. I mean, it's a possibility. See, that's what I'm saying here. Until an event has actually happened, It is only a probable future. Or it could be at most a likely future. Now, it's true that by knowing somebody's basic energies, by tuning into that and getting a feel for their patterns, the pattern of where they're headed, what is the nature of the current cycle that they're on now? What does that feel like? I mean, for example, just really simple. Is it a downward cycle or an upward cycle? That information can help you to predict a likely future. That can help show you where they will most likely end up. Just so you know, usually when I read for clients and I look into the future, what I can feel, the way it works for me at this time, it might work differently in a few years, who knows, but it's worked this way for a long time. So I tend to feel maybe 1 or 2 or 3, usually no more than that, 3 very strong, likely potential futures. And if you think about that, even if you can get it down to 3 potential futures for an element of their life, then that gives you something to work with. And then you can move more deeply into that psychically. And, you know, you could even tell your client, okay, this one feels the most strongest at this time. I know with my guides that they're not hesitant at all to help in the reading. And with my clients' guides, if I ask, you know, they'll tell us, okay, if you do this, you're most likely going to move towards this future outcome. If you do this, you might end up here. Sometimes they say about a certain situation, this is going to end badly. That's it, right? There's only one possibility then. But even then, until something has actually happened, there are multiple possibilities. So that's the thought I want to leave you with for right now. We'll probably revisit this subject. I want you to think about how the future is not fixed really until it's actually happened. Think about that. Now, that being said, there is a moment in time, because remember what I talked about where, you know, the present moment becomes the past and that creates the future. There is a moment in time where you've done, maybe you've moved so far down a path, a person has moved so far down or so far in that direction that it's like a snowball effect. And the energies are moving very strongly that way, for better or for worse. It can be positive or negative, but the energies are moving in a certain way. And at that time, there can just reach a moment where that potential future cannot be stopped. I mean, except for with some form of massive spiritual intervention, perhaps. And that's being on an energy track, okay? So we do reach points where the point of no return, okay? but even then, I like to say, because divine intervention could change it, or a spiritual intervention, or a great act of will, even then, until something has actually happened, I believe it could still be changed at least a little bit. And I would invite you to incorporate that knowing into your own approach to making predictions, because predictions should be empowering for your clients or for yourself and not fatalistic. Even if you feel very, very strongly that something is going to go a certain way, and it's not a very nice way, it's always good to work with your sitter or your client to help them figure out some way to make the best of that when that happens, for example. And you know, it also goes true for quote unquote positive predictions, and really the future is just the future. It's impossible to tell if it's positive or negative. We'll get into that in another video. I won't even go there today too in depth, but just open to that idea that the future is simply the future. But, you know, if you feel so strongly it's going to turn out in a good way for a person, you still need to let them know that it's possible that it might not turn out that way, because the future is not fixed until it has happened. And that's just honest, okay? That's just honest. If you say absolutely, I mean, this is why I don't, well, I won't say I never have, but I rarely, if ever, say, yes, it will absolutely be this way. You will absolutely be with this person forever. You will, you will absolutely win the lottery, okay? You know what I'm saying, metaphorically speaking. I don't do that too often because I would say instead, I'm fairly certain. Or I would say on a scale of 0 to 100%, I am 90% or 85%. And you will hear me use these scales in readings. That's something that works for me. The percent scale, I kind of feel energy in that way. But not everybody does. I know that. So you don't have to use a number scale. Although certainly if that is something that resonates with you, you could say to the person you're reading for, on a scale of 0 to 10, I feel a 9 that this will happen. Or an 8, or, I mean, that's also another, kind of a gentle way. If they ask you, is this going to happen? And you really don't feel, that's a kind of a gentle way you can relay that information to them too. You can say, well, nobody can really say for sure until it's actually happened, but on a scale of 0 to 10, I mean, I'm only feeling that a 4 on that, or whatever you're feeling. So that's not quite the same as saying, well, no way in hell, right? Although I've been known to say that too in a reading. So if it feels right, and if I know that person well, and I know that that kind of style would work for them, then I might say it that way. But however you say it, I mean, what you're really communicating is what you're feeling, and to the extent that you feel sure about that, but also acknowledging that until the event has actually happened, nothing is 100%. Does that make sense? Alrighty, well, perhaps we'll talk some more about predicting the future in future videos. But I'm not 100% certain. I am 75 to 85% certain that I will make future videos for you about predicting the future. There you go. Until next time, love to you all and bright blessings.